In royal life, the most important battles are rarely fought in public. There are no shouting matches on palace steps, no dramatic press conferences, no official declarations that a line has been crossed. Instead, everything happens quietly. A title changes hands, an estate changes owners, a familiar name disappears from the payroll, and suddenly, the balance of power inside the monarchy no longer looks the same. When Queen Elizabeth II died, the world focused on the crown, on Charles becoming king, on the pageantry, the mourning, the history. But behind the scenes, something else happened. Prince William inherited control of a vast private empire, land, money, homes, businesses, and centuries of influence. And once that empire became his, he started making decisions, real decisions, the kind that reveal how a future king thinks. And one of those decisions sent a ripple straight through Queen Camilla's family. Because this wasn't just about one contract, it was about a warning that the era built around Charles would not automatically roll into the era of William, and that anyone who assumed they had a permanent place inside that world may have misread the future. The day William stopped being just the heir. September 8th, 2022. Queen Elizabeth II dies at Balmoral. In that single moment, the monarchy changed shape. Charles became king, Camilla became queen consort, and Prince William became something much more powerful than many people realized. He became the Duke of Cornwall. That title sounds ceremonial. It isn't, because attached to it is one of the most powerful private estates in Europe, the Duchy of Cornwall. This wasn't a symbolic upgrade. It was an instant transfer of wealth, leverage, and institutional independence. For the first time in his life, William was no longer just preparing for power. He was now running a serious royal operation of his own. And once you understand what came with the duchy, you understand why his decisions began attracting so much attention. The empire, hidden inside the monarchy. The Duchy of Cornwall was created in 1337, not last century, not in the Victorian era. In 1337, it was built to provide income to the heir to the throne, and over nearly 700 years, it expanded into a sprawling empire of land, property, investments, and rights. Today, that empire includes around 135,000 acres, farmland, coastlines, rental properties, holiday cottages, historic villages, commercial assets, financial holdings, and most people never think about it at all. But this is the hidden architecture of royal power. The monarchy is not just crowns and ceremonies, it is land, and land means money. By 2025, William was reportedly receiving around $30 million a year in income from the duchy. That is not pocket money. That is not ceremonial privilege. That is financial authority on a scale large enough to shape relationships, priorities, and loyalties. Because when one person controls that much property and that much income, they also control something else: access. Who is hired, who stays close, who benefits, who loses influence. And that is where this story stops being abstract. Because once William took control, one familiar name suddenly found herself on the outside. The quiet removal that changed the mood. Her name was Annabel Elliot, Queen Camilla's sister, a respected interior designer. And for years, part of the ecosystem around Charles's management of the Duchy of Cornwall. Annabel had worked on duchy-linked properties, especially holiday rentals and design projects tied to the estate. She wasn't just a random contractor. She was family, or at least family adjacent in the way royal networks often work. Trusted, established, part of the old arrangement. Then William inherited the duchy, and that arrangement changed. Reports indicated that Annabel was no longer being employed in the same way under William's leadership. No dramatic accusation, no public feud, no palace war on the front page, just a simple, unmistakable shift. William was taking charge of his estate, and he was doing it on his terms. For people outside royal circles, that may sound routine. New boss, new team, but inside a monarchy, even the most administrative choices can carry emotional and political meaning. Because this wasn't only a staffing decision, it was a signal. The prince, who would one day be king, had started to draw boundaries. The money involved was relatively modest compared with the overall size of the duchy. But that's not why the story mattered. It mattered because of what it implied. It implied that William was not interested in inheriting every old habit that came with Charles's long stewardship of Cornwall. It implied that people who had grown comfortable under one royal era could not assume they would glide untouched into the next. And most of all, it implied independence. William was not managing his new position like a placeholder. He was behaving like an owner, like a decision maker, like someone already thinking not as a prince waiting for the future, but as a man shaping it. That is what made the move feel larger than a payroll adjustment. It wasn't really about Annabel Elliot alone. It was about whether William would preserve the networks built around his father, or slowly dismantle them and replace them with his own. Any story involving William and Camilla carries old emotional voltage, because their history did not begin in peace. William grew up inside one of the most public and painful marriages in modern royal history. He saw what happened to his mother, he saw the emotional cost, and the woman at the center of that shadow was Camilla Parker Bowles. Now, to be clear, William has never publicly treated Camilla with open disrespect. He attended Charles and Camilla's wedding. He has appeared alongside her in public. He has done what the monarchy requires, maintained composure. But composure is not the same as closeness, and public duty is not the same as private trust. That's why even neutral business decisions involving Camilla's side of the family attract so much interest. People don't just see administration, they see history. They wonder whether the distance is strategic, emotional, or both. The truth may be less dramatic and more revealing, because William may not need to be acting out old pain for his choices to still redraw the lines of influence around Camilla. He may simply be doing what future monarchs eventually do, building a system around people they trust most. And if that quietly squeezes out some of the old network, so be it. William's style is already coming into focus. This may be the most important part of the story. The Duchy of Cornwall is not just William's inheritance, it is his rehearsal room, a place where he can test how he leads, how he delegates, how he manages loyalty, optics, money, and tradition. And the early signs suggest something clear. William's style may be more disciplined, more selective, and less sentimental than the royal system many people are used to. He appears willing to review inherited arrangements, to ask whether old structures still make sense, to bring in people he trusts, and to make changes without apologizing for them. That does not necessarily mean ruthless, it may simply mean modern, more like executive leadership than old aristocratic habit, more like stewardship with accountability than tradition for tradition's sake. But even modernization creates casualties, especially when a system has long depended on personal relationships as much as formal roles. And that is exactly why this story landed so hard inside royal commentary, because it hinted that William's future reign may not be warm and accommodating to everyone who once had influence through Charles. The bigger inheritance still ahead. And yet, astonishingly, the Duchy of Cornwall may only be the beginning, because William's future inheritance is even larger. When Charles became king, he personally inherited Sandringham and Balmoral from Queen Elizabeth II. These are not crown estate properties. They are private, personal, passed through the family from monarch to monarch. One day, William is expected to inherit them too. That matters because these estates are not just expensive, they are emotional centers of the royal world. And Christmas at Sandringham, final days at Balmoral, private conversations, family fractures, grief behind closed doors. Owning these places is not just about wealth. It is about controlling the private geography of monarchy itself. Who is invited? Who belongs? Who has standing? Who does not? And once William becomes king, those decisions will be his, which raises a difficult question for anyone whose influence is strongest under Charles. What happens when the center of power moves? Camilla's power now and later. At this moment, Queen Camilla holds enormous status. She is queen consort. She lives at the heart of the monarchy. She shares the king's household, schedule, and institutional weight. And after years of public controversy, she has carved out a role that once seemed politically impossible. But royal power can be secure in the present and uncertain in the future. Because when Charles is no longer king, Camilla's position changes automatically. William becomes monarch, and private estates like Balmoral and Sandringham pass onward to him. That means the spaces she now occupies as part of the reigning court would no longer be hers by right in the same way. Her world would depend, at least in part, on William's choices. And if William is already signaling independence through the duchy, people close to Camilla have every reason to notice, not because a confrontation has happened, but because it doesn't need to. In royal life, the most powerful message is often the one delivered without direct conflict. A removed contract, a changed payroll, a revised circle of trust. That is how influence fades, quietly. It's tempting to frame all of this as a personal clash. William versus Camilla, future king versus current queen consort, a family cold war hidden behind polished smiles. But that may be too shallow. What we may actually be watching is something more important, a transfer of culture. Charles spent decades creating a certain world around the Duchy of Cornwall. Relationships matured there, dependencies formed there, styles of management hardened there. William inherited that world, but he does not seem interested in preserving it unchanged. And that is the real story. Not revenge, not drama for its own sake, but transition. The old king's ecosystem slowly giving way to the future king's philosophy. One staffing decision at a time, one boundary at a time, one small but revealing move at a time. What William's first moves may tell us about his reign. If the Duchy of Cornwall is a preview of William's future monarchy, then the preview is already fascinating. Suggests a reign that may be smaller, tighter, more controlled, less tolerant of inherited entitlement, more focused on performance, image, and trust. It suggests a king who may not be interested in carrying every family network forward out of politeness. And it suggests a leadership style that sees royal privilege not just as inheritance, but as management. Management of reputation, of money, of personnel, of public expectation. That approach could strengthen the monarchy, or it could make it feel colder. Perhaps both. But one thing is already clear. William is learning that the crown is not just worn, it is administered. And the people closest to the throne are often the first to feel what kind of administration is coming. Royal history is often remembered through spectacles, coronations, state funerals, weddings, balcony appearances. But sometimes the future reveals itself in much quieter ways, in estate reports, in inherited titles, in decisions so small they almost look routine, until you realize what they mean. When William inherited the Duchy of Cornwall, he gained far more than land and money. He gained a chance to define himself, to show how he leads, to decide whether the next royal era would merely continue or deliberately change course. And with one quiet move affecting Camilla's circle, he may already have answered that question. Not with a speech, not with a confrontation, but with the kind of message the monarchy understands best. A silent one, because in royal life, power does not need to raise its voice to be heard.